From the American College of Financial Services, welcome to Annuity Insights, in partnership with New York Life.
Welcome. I'm Michael Finke, Professor of Wealth Management at the American College of Financial Services, and this is Annuity Insights, a fascinating series that dives into the science of annuities and their uses. I'm joined today by Andrew Bigg, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and Jason Fichtner, Executive Director of the Retirement Income Institute. And both Jason and Andrew used to be the Deputy Commissioner of the Social Security Administration. They had the same job. In fact, they had it one after the other. So great to have you on our podcast today. And some people might be asking, all right, what does Social Security have to do with annuities? I like to think of Social Security as America's favorite annuity. Why is Social Security considered an annuity?
Well, an annuity delivers a stream of payments that lasts for as long as you live. And that's precisely what Social Security does. When you pay into the program during your working years at retirement, Social Security calculates a benefit, but that benefit lasts for as long as you live. It often will offer survivor's benefits if you leave a widow behind. It offers inflation adjustments. So it really is, in most respects, an annuity. It differs in certain ways from commercial annuities, but the basic concept is the same. So I think you are right that Social Security is the largest annuity in America, and Americans depend on it a great deal.
When I hear people say they hate annuities, I think to myself, Social Security is pretty popular.
Well, that's what I was going to add, Michael. So this is the old joke we have, right? If you go out and ask people in the street, hey, do you want to get a paycheck for life in your retirement? They say yes. If you ask them, do you want to make sure you don't outlive your savings? They say yes. If you ask them, do you want an annuity? They say no. But you've just offered them the exact same things an annuity presents themselves to. And then when you tell them Social Security's annuity, they give you a funny look. And as Andrew said, that Social Security is an annuity. An annuity gives you a fixed series of payments. Some can be fixed term for years, but you can get life annuities, which again last for the rest of your life. And as Andrew said, Social Security is an inflation-protected annuity. It gives you a series of payments every month for the rest of your life. It is the best annuity out there. And what we need to do now is start talking about income in retirement and how commercial annuities with Social Security as a base government annuity can help people have a financially secure retirement.
So, Jason, how does the Social Security annuity differ from conventional private annuities? What are some of you mentioned inflation adjustments. What are some of the other differences between private annuities and Social Security?
Well, one is to realize that Social Security is the Old Age Survivors and Disability Insurance Fund. So the other thing about an annuity is insurance is a contract. Social Security is an insurance program. It's an old age and disability insurance program. And one of the primary differences between a commercial annuity and Social Security, as Andrew mentions, you have to basically pay in through working and payroll taxes to qualify for Social Security retirement and disability programs. And then it's also based on when you claim. The benefit amount, the monthly benefit amount is based on, right now, age 67 is the full retirement age. And the monthly benefit changes. If you claim early at 62, you get a 30% reduction monthly benefit. If you wait until age 70, you can get a 24% increase in monthly benefit. But there's also, again, survivors benefits that come along to it. And in the commercial market, you can buy those, but they are more costly.
Social Security does one other thing that commercial annuities don't or can't. Social Security is a social insurance program. We all pay in, we all receive benefits out, but it has a progressive benefit formula. If you're a low-income worker over your career, you'll receive a Social Security benefit, a Social Security annuity that is worth about 90% of your pre-retirement earnings. If you're somebody who earns the maximum taxable wage each year, which is about $175,000 this year, you'll receive a Social Security benefit that's worth maybe 30% of your pre-retirement earnings. Now, in private markets, you can't run a system like that. You'd have huge adverse selection problems. People wouldn't wouldn't buy it. But when you have a universal program like Social Security, it has this, it's a combination, Social Security in a way is a combination of a forced savings program and sort of a welfare program that supplements people with low incomes. So it can do those two things at once. It pays out as an annuity, but the annuity formula is progressive so that people with low earnings get a higher replacement rate than people with high earnings.
And when we think about Social Security as being, in a way, a substitute for a private annuity, how should we be thinking about delayed claiming as essentially equivalent to buying more Social Security? So how do you think about delayed claiming as a financial decision?
Well, let me start with that, then let Andrew sort of opine after, because Andrew mentioned the idea that Social Security is a progressive benefit formula. And I think that's important to recognize and then also double down on. Because as Andrew said, for someone who's a low lifetime earner, they could get a replacement rate that's basically 90% of their pre-retirement income. But for someone who's a high earner, it could be 30%. And on average, Social Security was basically designed to replace about 40% of your pre-retirement income. Now, if you talk to financial planners, a lot of them say you should have between 70 and 80% replacement rate of your pre-retirement income as income in retirement for a financially secure retirement. So when you think about Social Security, for many people, it's not going to be your only source of income in retirement. And we need to think about how you can buy more protected annuity, more protected income in retirement. One of those ways is to delay claiming Social Security. So imagine somebody whose full retirement age is 67, and they were scheduled to get a $2,000 monthly benefit at age 67. If they instead claimed at 62, they'd get $1,400. Right? So that's a 30% reduction in the monthly benefit amount for the rest of their life. If they delay claiming until 70, they get $2,480 or a 24% increase. The difference between that age 62 and age 70 benefit amount is a 77% increase. Talk about buying additional protected annuities, an additional inflation protected annuity. That's $1,080 more per month by claiming at age 70 instead of 62. That again is inflation protected for the rest of your life. And that also impacts the benefit that a spouse can get, a surviving benefit as well.
One other thing I'd add on that is, we talked before about how Social Security is a progressive program. The benefit formula is progressive so that low earners get a higher replacement rate than high earners. At the same time, when we're thinking about the claiming decision, as Jason talked about, delaying claiming is like buying an additional annuity. At that margin, Social Security is actuarially fair, meaning that whether you're a low earner with a high replacement rate or a high earner with a lower replacement rate, if you delay claiming, you're going to get the same percentage increase in your benefit. So the fact that Social Security is progressive in terms of its benefit formula doesn't mean that high earners shouldn't think about delaying claiming. They are still getting a sort of an actuarially fair deal by delaying. But what they're doing is they're buying a larger annuity, and they're buying a larger annuity on favorable terms from Social Security. It's got low administrative costs. You have inflation adjustments built in. So just because Social Security is progressive doesn't mean that middle or high earners shouldn't think about delaying to get that bigger annuity payment.
And to Andrew's point, just realize what you're talking about is it's roughly or approximately an 8% increase every year that you delay claiming. It's really hard to guarantee yourself an 8% return every year.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what is actuarially fair, because I disagree with you, Andrew. It's not actuarially fair for high earners. Because high earners live longer. So, and a lot of the formulas that were created for estimating how much extra Social Security benefit you get were done in an era where high income people didn't live as long. So you're actually, first of all, define what actuarially fair means, and then explain why I'm right.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you framed the question in that unloaded way. Now, what actuarially fair would essentially mean the present discounted value of your lifetime benefits is insensitive to the age at which you claim benefits. I mean, let's take that stream of benefits you get discounted back at the yield on the Social Security Trust Fund. That present value will be the same, approximately whether you claim at 62 or whether you claim at 70. Beyond 70, there's no actuarial adjustment, so you would not want to delay past that. So what it means is, from the perspective of your lifetime benefits, but also perspective of the Social Security program's financing, it doesn't care at what age you claim. Now, what I should have said, it's roughly actuarially fair. The interesting thing with Social Security is the terms on which you receive increased benefits for delayed claiming, those are not calculated each year to make them actuarially fair. They're simply set in statute. I think all of them would have been in 1983 at the latest. And then, so those terms are set in statute. Then you have changing interest rates. So it's sort of by coincidence actuarially fair. The issue is it fair, actuarially fair for every person? In general, what we've had is increases in differential mortality by income, meaning it was always the case that high-income people lived longer than low-income people for a variety of reasons. Now they live longer. This is a common, think of your sort of deaths of despair narrative that you may read about, where longevity is not increasing for people at the bottom of the income ladder. So you do get studies looking at, well, should you delay claiming? And it is, in fact, more advantageous for high earners today. So you are correct. I guess the issue is your mortality is highly uncertain, and so you know your average based on sort of observable characteristics, your gender, your race, your income, your education. But even within that, there's a lot of uncertainty. But that's why having that higher annuity payment makes sense. So even if you're somebody who may think, okay, I'll have a lower expected longevity, based on family history or other characteristics, you still have an enormous amount of uncertainty in how long you're going to live. So on a sort of a welfare basis of your own well-being, I think even a lot of lower income people would benefit in terms of their utility, or however we want to measure it, by delaying claiming, by locking in that benefit. Because what you're doing is protecting yourself against poverty late in life. If you're age 62, you can easily go back and work longer and save more. If you're age 92, you can't. So this is where some of the conventional approaches to thinking about claiming ages, like break-even ages and all that, they simply miss the annuity value, the insurance value of having that higher benefit later in life. So it's a more sophisticated kind of question, I think, than sometimes people give it credit for. But to roll back, I will say you are, in fact, correct.
Well, talk to me about and Jason, when people say, I used a break-even analysis to decide not to delay claiming, what is your immediate reaction to that?
Well, so this is one, and Andrew and I were at Social Security when we changed the policy, because the agency used to have its claims reps tell people when they walked in at age 62 and someone asked them, when should I claim Social Security? The agency said, well, take it at 62 because you'll be ahead for 14 years. And part of it, someone says, oh, I'll be ahead for 14 years. That sounds like a great deal. I'll take it. But the agency never said, well, then if you live to 76, you'll then be behind for the rest of your life. And part of the problem we get into, and Andrew mentioned this too, is people aren't thinking about this as longevity insurance or what they might need down the road as a higher monthly income amount to help offset additional bills or healthcare costs. So when someone says, I did a break-even analysis, I said, do you have enough money to last you 20, 30 years in retirement? And they don't necessarily think about that. And again, the question is, when are you going to die? No one wants to talk about that. No one wants to answer that question. They don't even know. And so one of the things we tell people, at least from a financial planning standpoint, like there are some people who at 62 need Social Security. They can't afford to delay. They don't have any outside income, and Social Security is going to be the one thing they need. They've had a hard job. If you can't afford to delay, don't. But if you can afford to delay, even 1 month, 1 year, 2 years, 3, 4 or more, you should delay. And again, as Andrew said, it's that important value of the insurance value, the longevity value you get from Social Security, and that higher monthly payment that is, again, inflation protected for the rest of your life. So if you claim at 70, you're going to get that higher monthly benefit. Again, it's 24% more than your age 67 benefit. It's 77% more than your age 62 benefit. That is then going to be inflation protected for the rest of your life. Think about the healthcare costs you might need when you're 70s or your 80s or 90s. That'll really help out to make sure you don't live in poverty. So we really need to consider sort of holistically and more the more the insurance value of what you might need in income down the road, and not just take the immediate benefit at 62. And the other thing I'll say on this too is a sort of behavioral thing. We've been trying to change this for the last 15 years, but Social Security calls the age 67 now is either called the normal retirement age or the full retirement age. What's normal about 67? And it can't be full because I just told you can get more benefits if you delay to 70. So how can you put more if it's already full? And then the age 62, they call the early eligibility age. Well, no one likes to be late for their monthly Social Security benefits. So what we should do is start calling this age 62 the minimum monthly benefit amount and age 70 your maximum monthly benefit amount. That'll help spur a better conversation with beneficiaries and also with their financial professionals.
There's actually some interesting research that looks at this question. Up until the early 1960s, there was no early retirement for Social Security. 65 was the earliest age at which you could claim benefits. And then beginning in the 1960s, they phased in for men and women at different times. They allowed you to claim reduced benefits as early as age 62. Now, the break-even age approach would often tell you, hey, that's a good thing to do. And indeed, a lot of people did it. But there's research, I think it's Timothy Smeating at Syracuse, that showed allowing that early claiming, which the break-even age approach says it makes sense, actually increased poverty in old age. And the reason it did is it paid extra benefits to people who were 62 years old or 63 who had a lower risk of poverty in the first place, but then paid lower benefits to people when they were 80 or 90 when their risk of poverty was much higher. So this is something where it's, people say, well, do I want to, the break-even age is sort of maximizing some present value or something. On the other hand, you might say, how do I minimize my risk of being 90 years old and in poverty? And that's something that I think resonates with people a little bit more in plain English terms. But it actually matters more, because being 90 years old in poverty is not a great thing. By delaying claiming a few years, you can protect yourself. You can effectively guarantee yourself against that. And that's a good thing.
As the baby boomer retirement wave crests, it's time to position yourself as the ideal partner for this growing pool of clients with the American College of Financial Services Retirement Income Certified Professional Designation. As an RICP, you'll get the specialized knowledge to help more clients with complex retirement planning needs. With the convenience and flexibility of the latest in e-learning design, the RICP delivers applied knowledge from over 45 retirement experts on Social Security, taxation, income planning, Medicare and Medicaid, long-term care planning, and more. Get started in our 3-course program today and become an RICP in 12 months or less. Now is the time to strengthen your client relationships with deep expertise to address the unique challenges of retirement. See how you can expand your opportunities at theamericancollege.edu/RICP.
So a lot of the people who are going to be listening to this podcast, don't worry, their clients are not going to be in poverty no matter what. So this becomes more of a wealth management decision. So does it make sense to delay claiming as part of a financial planning strategy for someone who's probably at the income limit, who it really is a present value choice? Now, oftentimes what I see is people compare the outcomes. In fact, there was a Morningstar study that was done on this recently, which was actually very disappointing to me. They compared some of the outcomes of delayed claiming, and the reference point, the direct comparison, was with a standard portfolio. So in other words, they would say that, well, if you had invested in 50% stocks and 50% bonds, you would end up with more money by the time you hit age 85 or 90. Why is that the wrong way to think about delayed claiming from a wealth management perspective?
Yeah, it is sort of disappointing to get something like that, which is a very unsophisticated way of thinking about the question, aimed at people who should be very sophisticated investors. And the reason you don't want to say, let's delay claiming, put all the money in the stock market, is there's just very different risk levels between them, particularly over the time horizons that retiree is thinking about. If you said, let's instead take the money and put it into treasuries, something that has the same certainty being paid off as Social Security, that gives you more apples to apples comparison. Now that's still for a high income person with a long expected lifespan. That even that may say you're better off delaying claiming because of just how the mortality adjustments work. Just acting as if there's arbitrage between risky investments and safe investments. Look, if that were true, nobody would ever hold bonds for any reason. So they're missing something in that case.
And I think I'd add to this, you start thinking about, portfolio, is we generally get stuck in this sort of world about thinking about equities and bonds or equities and fixed income. And I think we have to be more holistic when we start thinking about asset classes and include protected income as an asset class. And that can include Social Security and annuities. And when you start thinking about what it means to delay claiming, and again, Andrew mentioned this, again, Social Security is an insurance program. What do we buy insurance for? To mitigate risk, right? You have home insurance, you have car insurance, you have theft insurance, you have health insurance. Now you've got old age survivors insurance, and that's Social Security. And one of the things they're trying to do is mitigate the risk of running out of money or being poor when you're retired, and delaying claiming helps that. So that's one thing. The other is not thinking about it as a portfolio, where if you can delay claiming, and you either using some of your IRA money, 401k money, or other savings, or you continue working to delay. You have income coming in. What you've now done, as Andrew mentioned, is you've guaranteed yourself a higher income amount that's protected when you retire. Once that happens, your budget constraint can be based off a higher monthly income from Social Security, which allows you to do a little bit more with your other portfolio assets, whether you want them in stocks or bonds or anything else. And I did some research with United Income several years ago, and what we found is that people who delayed claiming Social Security or had delayed claiming with an annuity on top ended up having more money and more wealth when they died than if they didn't, because they had a higher budget constraint that was a protected income. Again, that's that paycheck you're getting in retirement. They spent up to that, and they let their assets then grow. They also didn't trade when the market went down. They didn't panic. They could weather out the storm because they knew they had enough income to stay sort of financially secure in retirement because they had a higher monthly benefit from Social Security and potentially also an annuity.
I mean, I will say that the sorts of households you're talking about, high income people who are going to have plenty of savings on top of Social Security, in that case, the sort of the net present value calculation becomes more relevant than this sort of poverty protection argument. I mean, poverty rates among seniors are pretty low anyway, so there could be a lot of people who are simply optimizing their portfolio. I understand that. At the same time, I mean, to go back to the example you brought up of, well, instead of delaying claiming, I can take the money and put half of it in the stock market. Most people could do that, and if you do that, all you are is increasing the risk profile of your overall household portfolio. If you want to do that, just put more money in the stock market in your IRA or whatever. You don't have to do anything with Social Security. So you're mixing different questions in things like that, and I think you just want to isolate it. At the very high end, I think there are various fairly recent papers looking at this. There are benefits in a present value sense of delaying claiming because you are going to live longer than the mortality adjustments think you're going to live. At the same time, in terms of somebody's overall portfolio, I couldn't tell you how large those differences would be.
Well, I mean, the simple way to do it is just to assume that when you delay claiming, you're buying bonds, that you're essentially, you have something of value. You have a stream of steady income that is going to last until your expected longevity. So when I delay claiming, I am essentially buying more income, which is a bond-like asset. And not only is it a bond-like asset, it's a tip. It's a treasury inflation protected income stream. So it is like the safest portion of a bond portfolio. And if you want to talk about an asset that does not have a correlation with the equity portion of your portfolio, that inflation adjusted income stream is really an ideal kind of a bond asset to have in retirement. As Jason mentioned, there's also the insurance element, which is, you don't just estimate it to your expected longevity, the present value. You also have to add the benefit of knowing that if you live to the age of 100, you're going to continue to get that income. And that's a significant utility benefit that we see as an economist. But it's if you're going to live longer than the average American, generally speaking, and you're not going to spend anything, you're going to end up with more wealth by delayed claiming from the bond portion of your portfolio. Now, that means that the remainder of your portfolio is going to be more heavily weighted towards equities, and that's okay because your portfolio strategy, if you're judging it based on income variability, it's less risky because you've allocated your bonds to something that's actually going to provide you a less variable income than just trying to create an income, say, from a bond mutual fund.
And to add to that, as you mentioned thinking about the return, though, if you delay claiming Social Security, not only are you buying bond-like income, but the delaying guarantees you approximately an 8% return every year you delay claiming up to 70. And that's important to realize because if you put money in the market, you may not get 8%. You may lose money, right? So this is where you start thinking about that insurance value and the guarantee you get from Social Security delay claiming.
When I talk to people about delayed claiming for Social Security, the Social Security solvency issue often comes up. Many people think, well, I want to get the money today before they cut my benefits or whatever, which I think is an incorrect way of thinking about it. But I think that's a salient point, that we are arguing as if Social Security were absolutely riskless. And I think in a lot of cases it basically is. But a lot of Americans don't at all see it that way. So when I say you're comparing, a risky investment in the stock market with riskless Social Security, they're like, well, hey, hang on. They're both risky in different ways. And, those are things that people actually think about and bring up. I don't think it changes the conclusion ultimately, but I think it's worth talking about and thinking about with people.
I get this a lot, especially from clients. They're like, I want to grab Social Security before it goes bankrupt. Now, I hate the use of the term bankrupt because it's a pay-go system, Jason. What does that mean? What's a pay-go system?
Depending on how you define bankrupt, so I don't like the term either, because someone might argue that bankruptcy means you can't pay in full what you've promised, which if that's the case and Social Security's trust funds are depleted in 2033, then they're not going to pay full benefits. They can only pay roughly 80%. But usually when we think bankruptcy, we think it means going out of business, which means you get nothing. And that is not what Social Security is going to be. Again, on a worst case scenario, if Congress does nothing, which again, Andrew and I, we can talk about whether we think Congress would do nothing or what that means if we get to trust fund depletion in the early 2030s. But the worst case scenario is benefits would be reduced across the board roughly 20%. So even if you delay claiming and get a higher monthly benefit amount, that 20% cut would still be better than if you claimed earlier and got a 20% cut because you're trying to have income replacement in retirement. But Social Security is not going bankrupt. It'll be there. And I think Congress will do something because I don't want to see any senior get a 20% reduction in their monthly benefit check.
Andrew, you were deputy commissioner. What probability do you place on the likelihood that benefits are going to get cut by 21%?
0.
Yeah.
and then let's put it this way. I've spent the better part of the last 25 years arguing we should cut Social Security benefits. And I'm not saying I would argue we should increase them at the low end, but to be frank, if you compare what Social Security is paying to high income households today, I mean, 2 maximum wage earners retiring today these are people who earn 170 or so, for at least 35 years. They would get about $96,000 a year in Social Security benefits. If that same couple lived in Canada, they would get $30,000 a year in benefits. I mean, Social Security is just way too generous at the top end. And that's part of what drives, the cost for the program. At the same time, Congress just isn't going to cut this overnight. Even if it did, this is getting a little into the weeds, even if Congress decided to cut benefits, they will tend to do it based on your birth cohort. This is the way they think about things. Say the retirement age is set on the year in which you were born. So if they decide we're going to cut benefits by 20% for people born in certain years, they're going to figure out some way to affect all those people equally, regardless of when they claimed. So it's the idea that you're going to somehow beat the system by claiming early. I don't think that's going to happen. And once again, if even if Social Security benefits do get cut, that's all the more reason to to maximize the Social Security benefit you do get. So I just think at the end of the day, I think we should cut benefits, particularly at the high end. Eventually, maybe we will. But the idea we're going to cut benefits by 20% across the board, Congress is just going to borrow the money or whatever they do. And it is bad public policy. Because what is going to happen is your Social Security is going to be made safe by this. They're going to borrow all the money. It's just everything else you want the government to do is not. So, a mixed blessing there. I mean, because there's things the government does other than pay Social Security benefits, and you'd like them to have the money to do it. But the politics of it are what they are. I mean, 10,000 baby boomers per year shifting from being workers paying into the program to retirees collecting benefits out of it, that changes the political dynamic significantly. And so the chances of benefit cuts are much, much smaller, but what we need is for both parties to sort of wake up and figure out how they're actually going to fix this problem. And so far, I've seen very little sign of that.
Yeah. And to Andrew's point, again, he mentioned a number, but just get it out there. So right now, between 2024 and 2027, 4.1 million Americans are turning 65 every year. That's 11,200 a day. And when we start talking about Social Security trust fund depletion, and Andrew, we start thinking about this like politically, is Congress going to let benefits Social Security has no borrowing authority. So if Congress does nothing, then Social Security can only pay out in benefits what it collects in payroll tax revenue, basically, and that's the 80% figure here, or 20% reduction. We both have a hard time seeing Congress just letting that happen. But again, we've sort of seen Congress be dysfunctional lately, taking things to a fiscal cliff or trying to make a point. Would I say the chance is zero? No, but I think it's less than 5, and I could see a political risk of some holdouts trying to make a point and saying we're going to delay benefits by a month just to make a case that Social Security needs reform. Who knows what that's going to look like in the next 8-9 years. But again, to Andrew's point, you do want to try to maximize your monthly benefit amount regardless of what might happen.
Interesting thing when I think about the changes in the political dynamic. One advantage as you get older is you've just seen more. And literally 20 years ago at this time, I was traveling around the country with President Bush. I did a number of events with him on Social Security reform. This is 2005 when President George W. Bush was really pushing his plans to fix Social Security. And he said he was flexible and he'd compromise and all that. At the same time, his preference would have been to fix as much of the Social Security funding problem on the benefit side as possible. He wanted to reduce benefits as much as he could, raise taxes as little as he had to. If you look where we are now with a Republican president who's pledged, I am never going to cut benefits for anyone today or in the future, it's this massive shift in the political center of gravity on Social Security, and that's just within the Republican Party. So the dynamics of Social Security policy have changed. Whether for the better or not depends on your views, but I think the chances of some calamitous benefit cut have gotten smaller and smaller.
I think we saw this with the Fairness Act, that there really is no political party that wants to cut benefits. In fact, everybody just wants to give more.
But the problem, of course, is at some point you run out of money because we've been hearing for 30 years that our budget sort of path is unsustainable, that the deficits are too high, debt is rising. Social Security and Medicare together are the drivers of that. The rest of the budget is basically in balance. Whatever you may think about what they're using the money for, it's basically in balance. If Social Security and Medicare were not increasing in cost, we would not have a long-term budget problem. At some point, you can say we're simply going to borrow to pay for Social Security and Medicare, and sure, that guarantees your benefits. At some point, the financial markets worry about getting their money back, and that's when you've got a real issue. So it's, your Social Security benefits are safe, but there are these macro problems we still really need to worry about.
So we're getting near the end of our conversation here, but I want to talk very quickly about taxation of Social Security benefits, because this is an issue for a lot of clients of financial advisors. 80% of their benefits are taxed. That really is just a benefit cut for higher earners, is it not?
Oh, it's effectively a means test, yes.
Yeah, that's the best way to think about it. This is like what I call it a backdoor means testing. So when people hear means testing Social Security, they think means testing means that your monthly benefit check will get reduced because of your income. What is actually happening is we are doing it on the 1040 side on the taxes. So, if you're single and you have combined annual income that's less than $25,000, then none of your Social Security is taxable. If it's between $25,000 and $34,000, up to 50% of your Social Security benefits are taxable. And if you make more than $34,000, then up to 85% is taxable. Those figures have not been adjusted for inflation. So in some ways, more and more people are getting into the taxable portion of Social Security. And like you said, it ends up being a backdoor means test.
And one reason to clarify that it is effectively a means test, it's not simply that we are taxing your Social Security benefits, which most countries do that, but we are taxing Social Security benefits and the proceeds go back to Social Security. So not simply from your household perspective, but from Social Security's financial perspective, it is equivalent to a means test. It's a poorly targeted thing. I hate to tell people, America's retirees are the richest retirees in the world, the richest retirees in history. Do we need to cut taxes on the richest retirees in history when your Social Security program is $25 trillion in the hole? I personally think not. But it's just, we're at the stage where people are just grabbing what they can. And the public employees want money for Social Security Fairness Act. Rich retirees say, I want to cut my Social Security taxes. And it's this scramble to get the resources, I think, before they run out. But it's not, Congress, a mature Congress should stand in the way of those kinds of things and really assess, is this the best use of our public resources?
Boy, that's a big threshold, maturity. Don't see that happening anytime soon. So let's have a conversation about the taxation element, because it does seem like if you're actually going to be mature and you're going to try to bring Social Security finances in alignment, you're going to have to get rid of that income threshold on payroll tax contributions. Now, what are some differences that we might see in how that actually gets implemented? Are you going to have unlimited income tax, payroll tax on income, or is there going to be some kind of a donut hole? What do you think is actually going to happen in the future if we do see taxes going up?
Well, I'll let Andrew answer that one, but let me just talk real quick about, because just to wrap up the taxation of benefits, there's also a marriage penalty. Because again, I mentioned it was $25,000 for single, but it's $32,000 if you're married filing jointly. It's not $50,000. So there's basically a marriage penalty in the taxation as well. So just to qualify that, then I'll let Andrew now go with the taxation, the payroll taxes, and all.
Sure. And I guess I'll give you two answers. One is, if you're somebody like me, and my politics and economics lean right, I would prefer not to increase the maximum taxable wage for Social Security. Am I going to have to accept that to get some sort of deal? The answer to that is yes. Politically speaking, it's very difficult for one political party to pass entitlement reform. So you're going to have to make a deal. That's the pound of flesh that congressional Democrats would ask for. At the same time, and this is where I'll push back on the framing of your question, where you treat it as sort of obvious that this should happen. And a lot of people think they're like, why do we have a cap on wages subject to Social Security taxes in the first place? They treat it as a no-brainer that all earnings should be taxed. The reality is, if you look at developed countries around the world, almost all of them have a cap on their wages subject to pension taxes, and almost all of them have a cap that's substantially lower than ours. I mean, if you're in Canada, payroll taxes go up to about $70,000. In the UK, it's a little higher than that. We're at $175,000. We're substantially higher. And so there was this idea at the time Social Security started that, at a certain income point, then you just save more for retirement on your own. Let me just give you just sort of an oddball, and I'm just thinking broader on this, that if you're somebody whose politics or economics lean right, the case for not raising the taxable maximum just sort of obvious. You just don't like taxes. Even if I were somebody whose sort of politics leaned left, you shouldn't want to do it. And the reason is that, that's essentially the biggest peacetime tax increase in history. It's a lot of money. You're raising effectively the top marginal tax rate by 12 percentage points. Now, even if you're going to get that, you're not going to get it twice. And what that means is, if all that money goes for Social Security, effectively to pay higher and higher benefits to rich people, it means you're not going to get the other things you could do. If you want Medicare for all or Green New Deal or free college or all those things, those are gone if you eliminate the taxable maximum. It's the opportunity cost of doing that regardless of where you are. So I think we'll have to do something on that end, but do I think it's good policy or necessary policy? I don't.
I think the only thing I'd add is when you start thinking about this from a policy to be stable and permanent, usually needs to be bipartisan. And to Andrew's point, that means Republicans are going to have to give something on the revenue side and Democrats have to give something on the benefit side. And I think part of that might be if you raise the taxable maximum, you might raise it a little bit, but if you raise it too much, to Andrew's point, you're going to crowd out the ability to do other types of funding activities. So one may be raising the payroll tax for everybody, 2 percentage points, one for the employer, one for the employee, because again, it's shared right now equally, even though the full burden falls on labor. And the second, and Andrew sort of mentioned this in his research, he's been pointing this out, is we might want to do something like more towards a flat benefit or flatter, where you reduce the benefit for higher income people, raise it for lower lifetime earners. And so it's not as progressive, it's still progressive, but you help those at the bottom and you do something at the high end to curtail benefits, because they're the ones who can afford to save more outside the system on their own. And that might be the balance that gets us where we need to be.
A common proposal is currently around 82 or 83% of total wages and salaries are subject to the payroll tax. If you go back to 1983, about 90% were. So a common proposal is to lift the cap on earnings subject to the payroll tax. So you get back to that 90% level. Now, again, that sounds perfectly reasonable. That would mean raising the cap to somewhere north of $350,000. Here's the thing, though. It's effectively a 12 percentage point increase in your tax rate at the margin for people making between, say, 175 and 350. Now, look, these people are well off. They are rich people. They're not the private jet crowd. They're not the millionaires and billionaires. And it's a meaningful tax increase for those people. So the politics of this are tough in the sense if you ask people, hey, do you want to tax the guy behind the tree? They're like, yeah, sure. But if you think of the first 2 years of the Biden administration, when they had control of Congress and the presidency, they had a bill sitting right there that would do all this, that would fix Social Security entirely by raising taxes, with a huge amount of that coming by raising or eliminating the payroll tax ceiling, and they didn't push it. Because they understand there's going to be a lot of pushback even on something like that. So, but this points to, I think, what Jason said of having to be bipartisan. Both sides are going to have to go together and accept some things that they really don't want to accept. Doing it on your own, the politics of it are extremely difficult. So, at this point, I think they'll just kick the can down the road until 2033, because that's a way of avoiding any short-term political hit, and that's the main thing for most politicians.
All right. Back to the maturity thing. I think that if I had to bet that we're probably going to continue to kick we're going to have the current situation for a while. And probably the government is just going to have to borrow more money, but it's very likely you're not going to see a benefit cut. Andrew, Jason, thank you so much for this conversation about Social Security. A little bit depressing, but I think it provides a lot more information about what financial planners can expect when they're talking to clients about Social Security claiming decisions. So appreciate your time.
Oh, it's been great. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening, and we hope you join us on future episodes. Annuity Insights is a production of the American College of Financial Services. Annuity Insights is produced and owned by the American College of Financial Services with generous support from New York Life Insurance Company. Accuracy of information is subject to change, taxes, legal, rates, etc., but believed accurate as of the time of recording, January through April 2025.